Most of us have been told that morning sickness is just part of pregnancy, but today's guest, Jess, is here to challenge this. As the founder of The Wellness Element and a board-certified holistic healthcare practitioner, Jess is on a mission to transform how we approach morning sickness and a more severe form known as HG. I cannot figure out how to pronounce the full name, so I'll leave that to Jess in the episode. Through Jess's pregnancy and experience with morning sickness and HG, she discovered that it's actually not something you have to live with, nor should you. Morning sickness is a symptom of deeper imbalances within your body. She reversed her own debilitating HG in less than 1 week through root cause healing. Jess now educates women on how innately intelligent their bodies are, and that severe morning sickness is a way to protect the baby from underlying toxins and imbalances. She supports women worldwide not only to reverse severe morning sickness and HG, but to prevent it altogether. This conversation is a testament to the power we all have when we take back control of our own well-being and make informed choices that lead to true healing. I cannot wait for you to listen to this conversation. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Follow Your Gut podcast. I'm your host, Juniper Bennett. If you found yourself here, it means you're ready to unlock the happiest and healthiest version of yourself and step into your role as the most confident leader of your family's wellness. Together, we'll navigate the path to optimal health and vitality. Let's dive in and transform your life. Welcome to the Follow Your Gut podcast, Jess. We are so honored to have you here and for you to share your passion and your wisdom around women's health, particularly in our mother-bearing years. And I can't wait to get to know you. So can we start by you introducing yourself and tell us who you are?
Yeah. Okay. So my name is Jess. I have a company called The Wellness Element, and it's really shape-shifted over the years. I started as a physiotherapist. So I took, my master's in science, trained under the traditional Western kind of education system. And at the time or shortly after, I was battling with some autoimmune issues. I kept going to the doctor. I went for 3 years to every specialist, and they were kind of like, you look young, you look healthy, you're fine, you're not overweight, nothing's wrong. Come back to us when it's worse. And, just the experiences that I was having, I was sick a couple times a month. I had glands that were, when they first saw me, I was hospitalized multiple times for like infectious diseases, they thought. So fast forward, I'm sitting at the doctor's office. I'm in year 3 of trying to get answers, and I get told what you eat and what you put in your body has nothing to do with your health. We don't consider that part of medicine. And I just had an aha moment. So I went on to take a nutritional therapy diploma within the field of epigenetics, so how your genes turn on or turn off your chances of disease and things like that. And I've just been kind of snowballing that information, learning traditional Chinese medicine, acupuncture, herbal medicine, more recently into German New Medicine. And so with all of that, I kind of really take a root cause approach to helping women in particular who have fallen through the cracks, feel seen and get answers to actually, stop feeling sick and tired. And then in my pregnancy journey, I was hit with HG, pretty debilitating, very debilitating. I was hospitalized many times. It was most that I could do to just sit still and not be sick in a day. And that went on for 5 months. And I came across a comment.
I'm not familiar with HG. Will you tell me what that is?
Yes. So HG is the short form for Hyperemesis Gravidarum. It is a severe form of morning sickness, and I would argue that more and more women are experiencing this. So it's kind of characterized by being sick multiple times a day, losing weight in your pregnancy rather than gaining it, an inability to eat and drink because you're so nauseous, and it's really a spectrum. So I mean, you could just veer just off of what we would consider unpleasant morning sickness and into light HG, or there's some women who have to have a PICC line inserted and have their IV nutrients fed to them the whole time because they're so sick they can't sustain that pregnancy, and either they or the baby will die. So with HG, it's a 1 in 3 rate of the fetal loss because of the nutrient deficiencies and the severity of the condition.
Wow.
Yeah. And
Okay.
of that, about 10% of those are terminations because the mom is suffering so badly and there's no real help. So you're lucky if you kind of find a doctor who even knows what it is and can diagnose it. And then once you're diagnosed, really the only option that the medical system has, and we'll get into this more, I'm sure, is harsh medications. They don't test prior to pregnancy, obviously, for safety. They don't test on pregnant women. So you're getting like anti-nausea chemotherapy drugs. They're just trying out any anti-nausea drugs that will work just to give you enough of a window that you could eat or drink and sustain the pregnancy. So I experienced that. Yeah, and came across a little comment on Instagram. A light bulb moment went off for me, and I deep dove. I said, I'm going to take some of the medication that they've been offering. I'm going to give myself like a couple days. And I just went hard into my research, ended up figuring out kind of my root causes at the time, worked around them the best I could. Within 3 days, I was only sick once, and I went on to never be sick in the rest of my pregnancy. And so now on Instagram, I really kind of work in this niche. I have, dozens of women that I'm currently helping to, move through HG or to prevent it in a future pregnancy if they've had it. And everybody that comes on my page says, I've never seen anybody doing this. You're the only one who's telling me that there's another way, essentially. So yeah, that's in a nutshell who I am and what I do.
Wow. That is, so you sent me an Instagram DM, and I can't even repeat the word HG, what it's short for. I don't even know. What is.
Yeah, Hyperemesis Gravidarum.
Okay, so I can't even say that word, but you said this in DMs, and I was just like, wait a minute, what is this? And I think that kind of speaks volumes that this is unknown. And just like so many conditions, we don't have the awareness until we are in it.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is a really powerful conversation to share because I don't think it's all that uncommon. It's just that the awareness isn't there. And so what you are doing is such a gift for women. Those statistics that you shared are alarming, and I can't wait to dive into this conversation because I know that gut health is at the root of this, and just to kind of uncover this together, because I think even if you don't have extreme morning sickness has been claimed as, oh, this is just a normal part of pregnancy. And any severity of it, any symptom at any stage in our life, whether we are pregnant or not, is our body communicating with us that something isn't right. And so let's dive into this.
Yeah, so I think there's so much that you said in there. Like, first of all, I do really want to bring awareness to the fact that, like, morning sickness can be normalized, like you said, but just think evolutionarily. Like, we would not have gotten this far as a species if women were debilitated, hospitalized, like barely surviving a pregnancy with HG. And so we've got to kind of question, like, why are we experiencing this now? What's changing? And things like that. I know we can't, be in the seat of a pregnancy 200 years ago, but I definitely think that there's a lot of factors at play. And they say it's about 3% of pregnancies. I would argue it's at least 10% of pregnancies because women just aren't being diagnosed or not being addressed. The other thing that's kind of tough about this is when you're feeling the most sick, it's kind of starting around week 5, 6, building around week 8, 9, 10, tapering off. Most women don't see a care provider until after 12 weeks, unless it's just an ultrasound tech who's really not going to be able to help you with morning sickness at that stage, right? So women are kind of just suffering in silence, especially if you're a first-time mom like I was, and you're like, is this normal? Is this not? Why are other women kind of managing their pregnancies okay? And why am I so sick? And it starts at that, right? It's an invisible condition there where, husbands, I find, think like, why is my wife, complaining? Or it can be because there's no awareness around that this condition actually exists. So they're dealing with something that's much more severe. It's threatening, for me, it was threatening my amniotic fluids because of the level of dehydration I had. So, even naturopaths were like, your fluid is so low that your baby could pass if you don't kind of address this. And so if taking a medication is what you need, if doing IVs are what you need, there's so many things. So I think the first point is like to really start talking about this. And I mean, if we look at research and statistics, it takes about 17 years for research to make it into hospital practice. So at best, we can hope that things are starting to move, and maybe when our kids have kids, they'll address it. But women aren't getting help in the meantime, right? And I find that, in September, there was some talk, I think it was September, there was some talk about a new gene discovery around HG, and they're finding that the people who have HG have really high levels of this GDF15 in their placenta and in their body. And everyone was so excited about this. They're like, yes, we found the cure. We know what it is. And I'm like, oh, wait, hold up. You have not found a cure. They are going to go through medical testing, research testing on this, trying to deduce to one variable because that's how research goes. And at the best, in 5-10 years, if they have millions of dollars to do this research, they'll have one prescription medication to offer you. My goal is to help, 1,000 or 10,000 women by that time, to reverse this from the root cause. So yeah, on a mission.
Well, I absolutely love everything you just said. And before we started recording, I asked you if there was a really powerful message that you wanted to share in this episode. And I want you to repeat that here. I feel like it is so timely with this because as a culture, we do this. We invest so much money into research, and then we have to wait. And in the meantime, we have given our power away. We forget that we can continue to heal ourselves. We can find the answers within ourselves, just like you did, just like I did for my son. And so, will you share that thought with us?
Yeah, so I think if there's a key message that I'd love to just kind of get translated through this episode, it's that we don't realize how much power we have over our own health, over, our physical body. It can be so easy to not know the answer. And so we look to an expert or we look to research to kind of provide that to us. And when that isn't readily available, we're waiting and we're waiting, right? And so I think the message that really needs to translate is like, you have so much power and so much control over your health, over your experience in pregnancy, over your children's health once they're here, and to really just learn the skills necessary to go inward and to kind of communicate with your body and to seek the answers, because you can do in days what medicine could do in months for yourself when you know that you're that powerful. And it sounds a little woohoo, but it's so true. And yeah, I just use so many different strategies. So people have communication tools, muscle testing, sway testing. People can use pendulums. There's lots of different ways where you can try to communicate and just, follow your gut and follow your intuition with things. I think motherhood is like an initiation into your intuition, right? And into trusting your gut. And that starts with pregnancy. And I think it's actually a gift that our system is going so askew from the way nature intended for us to realize and wake up and have our power. There's a lot of movements in the circles that you're probably in and I am in around women reclaiming pregnancy and birth and all of those things. And that same thing can be applied to your health circumstances. So I really want to share that message.
I absolutely agree with all of that. And I think that I love your perspective that everything that's happening in the world is such a gift to us women. And it's really helping us all wake up that we are the leaders of ourselves. We are the leaders of our family, and nobody else is looking out for us like we can. And just like your experience when you were unwell, you were told that food and what you put in your body doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to a system that isn't designed to heal your body. This
Yep.
system that we are all leaning on is designed to treat symptoms.
Mhm.
And if we are waiting to be treated, we will never heal.
Yeah.
Healing comes from within us, and it is up to us to heal our bodies.
Hmm.
So, Jess, will you share, how did you heal your body during pregnancy?
Yeah. So for me, the comment or the kind of light bulb moment that I had was looking through some of Dr. Ben Lynch's work. And I had read his books and kind of used some of his things before, but I just saw this little thing about histamine intolerance being linked to morning sickness. And then at the same time, when I would go and get hospitalized and need IV fluids, they'd go, oh, we're just going to give you a little bit of this antihistamine. And so my brain went like, he's saying it's histamine. The antihistamines take away my symptoms. There's something here. So I kind of deep dove into that. I started reading, I started researching. I learned that estrogen, as it raises in pregnancy, can raise your histamine by 500%. And if you do not have good clearance techniques for histamine, then that builds up and it's almost like a bucket or a pot boiling over the top. So for me, that's what I kind of went with. I had a little reflection at that time and I looked back and I'm like, when were all the days that I was hospitalized? And they were always after, it was over Christmas and stuff like that. So it was always when I had some sort of like event or I was doing something, and I chalked it up to just extending my energy too far, right? If I went out for 2 or 3 hours to try to be at a Christmas gathering, I was super, super sick the next day. And so when I looked back, it was actually all those little like trays of foods that you're eating, the cheese and meat platters and different things, because they're all high histamine foods. So I started kind of drawing the correlations. And for me, it was addressing my histamine that really changed the game for me. But it wasn't the only thing. So when I talked about that, I'm like, okay, but why? Why can't I get histamine out? Why am I so sensitive to it? What's kind of deeper? And at that, there's obviously a lot of gut health issues. There's a lot of liver and gallbladder function issues. There's also decreased kidney function issues because your kidneys really work to help with maintaining your electrolyte balances, minerals, flushing out of histamines. Your kidneys are really high in what's called DAO enzyme, and DAO is a gene that manages histamine. That's one of its main jobs. So for me, I started, really like peeling back antihistamine foods. I started taking things that I thought would support kidney function so that the kidneys could do their job. And so that was different minerals, mineral rich waters. At the time, I was drinking Berkey water and I didn't realize how much I was getting kind of mineral depleted from that because I was doing nothing to add it back. And I took beef kidney. So I'm really a proponent of like naturally occurring things rather than loading up on synthetic supplements where your body doesn't really know. And then after that, it was kind of like I started just working on this. I have 4 degrees and diplomas. I have probably as much knowledge of that since those. And I just had this insatiable, like, I need to understand, I need to know why, I need to be able to like visualize the whole map. And so for me, then I just went into a deep dive of like, what are all the contributing factors? And, I started out with 5 kind of leading causes for HG, and I'm at 7 to 8 now if you divide gut health and liver health. So there's a lot, and I think it's about the one thing that I keep seeing come up in the research and in the foundations who do the research or raise money for this is they're looking for a singular cause, and they keep saying that that cause is unknown. It's not that the cause is unknown, it's that the cause is multifactorial. And they don't have a way to measure and assess multifactorial issues, right? So I like to say it's a cocktail exclusive to you, and I have my own, and we don't yet know what the ingredients are, but we're going to kind of decipher that together. So that's sort of what I do now is I kind of, provide assessments and different things in those categories, let women come to the like, oh my God, this is all making sense because yes, I had issues of hormone imbalance before my pregnancy or gut health issues or whatever the case is. And you start to see that all these signs were there the whole time and you were just told they were normal or everybody else experienced them. And so you didn't even register that you were unwell before. In some cases, sometimes it's blatantly obvious, right? But some women don't know that painful periods and mood swings and heavy clotting periods are a sign of hormone imbalance. And then you fast forward that into pregnancy, and everything's kind of exaggerated in pregnancy, and your liver can't get rid of that excess estrogen, and now you're sick because your body's trying other ways to purge. So my take on HG is that it's your body's way of protecting the baby or you, because it's trying to rebalance something, or it's trying to purge toxins, or just create an equilibrium that's safe for the baby.
Wow, you are so very articulate and stunning, both physically beautiful and beautiful with your words. And as you're talking, I'm just sitting here thinking, oh my gosh, someday she is going to be like on the board of these. She's like going to be running this whole field of this whole gap that's missing in our system right now. You are going to be leading that, because that's where our world is going. Our world is going into the hands of moms and women who have had experiences like this.
Mm-hmm.
You've taken what you learned for yourself, and now you are sharing that healing with others. And that's something you and I share. I mean, that's exactly why I have created Only Organics, is to share the healing that I got to experience with my son. And so I'm really excited for where this is going, and that you are here. And I can't tell you the number of women who reach out and say, I have really bad morning sickness. Is it going to be safe to rebalance my gut? Is it going to be safe to do this? Is it going to be safe to do this? And I think as a culture, we have been so conditioned and so fear driven that it gives the system more power and it debilitates us. We have been told that it is so unsafe to do all of these things during pregnancy, to do anything, whatever it may be, but deeper, to heal our body during pregnancy. And so for women to have you to say, I've gone through this, I've done this, let's dissect your body, let's connect all of your symptoms, your timeline, and you have the power to heal you, is a gift that so many women need. Because I think, like I was saying, we have been robbed of that confidence in ourselves and of our bodies.
And I
And we have been conditioned to lean on the system that can only treat us, that can't heal us.
Yeah, there are so many things there. I'm like keeping track on my fingers of how many different things. I'm like, oh my God, I want to talk about that and that and that. Um, but I think it starts at birth for us, right? Like we come into the world potentially medicated in a fear-based area around strangers, being probably like, for the majority of us, like rifled up as soon as we enter the world. We don't have even access, and mom's pregnancy then was trust the experts on all the information, and just like that fear. So I think for me, something that was really powerful and that really helped, and I didn't know I was doing it at the time, but throughout my pregnancy, I just kept, as I do, researching everything and coming up with questions for my healthcare providers for everything and challenging them on everything. I was probably their most hated client, I'm going to assume. Um, but it led me to, why were we doing this? Why do you want to do this ultrasound? Well, to find out for this. And I was like, okay, well, if it's a yes, what's your next step? Well, then we'll do this test and it's way more invasive. And I'm like, okay, and what are the chances that gives you a really definitive answer? And what are my choices after that? And they're like, well, you could keep your pregnancy or terminate it if you know that information. And I was like, I don't think I want to be presented with an option where I want to choose to terminate or not, in genetic testing and whatever else they do. And so it became like, if I'm not going to follow that path, why am I putting my body through it? And so I just said no, and then the next test came up and I asked my questions and it was a no. It was a no for me. It was a no for me. And every time I said no, I felt so much more connection to what I had. Like I had to listen to myself rather than their answers, right? And so the only time in my pregnancy that I felt anxious was when I had that anatomy ultrasound coming up, because the ultrasound was the only thing that I gave my power to, or like wanted to kind of, have. And in that, I just kept thinking like, what if something comes up? What if they see something? What, like, it was so detaching from what I felt. And my husband would just at the time be like, "Do you feel sick? Have you been bleeding? Have you had any sign that anything's wrong?" And I'm like, "Well, no, no, no." And he's like, "Okay, why don't you go with that?" sort of thing, right? So I think that we don't realize that that's kind of dividing us away from our intuition the entire pregnancy. And then the baby comes into the world. And, again, we have to trust pediatricians or the experts or whatever. And there's hundreds of moms who will say, this is like, nobody is an expert on your baby. Like the guy who studied babies and only met yours for 3 minutes doesn't know more than you about your baby, than you have spent your, like, literally part of your cellular being and that you brought into this world through your body. So I think the more we start to find women, I want to tie this back to one other thing you said is like, I'm going to be part of the board or something. I will not, because they have me blocked, which is kind of something that's funny. So there are some organizations that do research on this. And I didn't know at first, but all my comments and all my attempts to share anything or to connect are blocked. But I have a personal account that I kind of go back and look at, and I'm like, yep, okay, definitely everything that I post is not being shown. And so I think that's another thing. Like when I was in physiotherapy, I thought, I'm going to go pitch myself to an emergency room of a hospital. I'm going to assess all the people with physical injuries coming in. I'm going to save the hospital millions of dollars because they're doing tests that they think are going to, like, you're not going to see a muscle on an x-ray, and this person has a muscle injury, so why waste money? So I thought, I'm going to just optimize this system. And in my physiotherapy training, we had these exercises where we had to go into hospital and work in a hospital for 8 weeks. And we had to give them a presentation about ways we thought they could improve their service or their efficiency on that ward. And every time they looked at you like they wanted to murder you. And they were like, yeah, thanks. We'll be doing none of that. We don't have the time, the resources, the, mental capacity to make changes, but thanks for your presentation. And all of the students that I kind of went along with, it was all very similar. So I just kind of had this thing, and then going through pregnancy, and I'm like, I could yell from the rooftops. And certainly that was my plan, to yell from the rooftops in the healthcare system about all the ways they were inefficient, and I could help them change for the better. And it's just falling on deaf ears. And so I realized that we have to create these systems outside of that. I went from being a clinical physiotherapist to now treating women with morning sickness off on the side, because these are just the gaps that women are falling through the cracks in, and it's having such a ripple effect on the health of our children, the health of our society. And I guess that's like kind of, I love these types of conversations and these connections, and like that you have a company and a product now that is serving, to fill that void, because it's going to be us women who tune into our own wisdom and share that with the collective that change the world.
Well, there's now so many things that you said that I have to touch on. And the first is when you kept saying no, no, no. And what it made me think about is every time we say no to something outside, we're actually saying yes to ourselves. And
Mm,
that is like the definition of taking back our power. And
so true.
so, for anybody listening, every single day at any stage in our life, we have the choice to say yes or no. And we can either say yes to ourselves or we can say yes to external power. And your experience, and that I think that it blows my mind, but I'm not surprised at the same time that you are blocked from these foundations or whoever, whatever they are, doing the research. Because, I was just having this conversation with my husband, one of our really dear friends. She has breast cancer, and she's just been, she did this like alternative healing and it went away, but it was like 95% gone. So she came back to her traditional doctors and they're like, we should do a full hysterectomy, mastectomy. You should do these chemo treatments to wipe it out completely just to be safe. And so she did. And now her cancer is back. And like inside of her, she's just dying because she knows that it was that
Mhm.
made it so much worse. And she had it in her gut that she really didn't want to do that it didn't feel right, but there was so much pressure. And she's been told now that there's no more that can be done and that she's going to die. So my husband and I were just having this conversation that it is such bullshit. And there is so much money poured into this research. There is no freaking way that there isn't an answer. There is no way. And so it's just like this conversation. They don't want to heal us. The system crumbles if everybody heals and it is a healing system. The insane amount of money goes away and they're not funded anymore. I'm going off on a tangent here, but I'm so fired up. I get so fired up about this because it was the same thing with my son. I mean, I took him to 17 different healthcare professionals when he was unwell. And every single time I'm asking, he has all these symptoms. They've got to be connected. No, there's not a connection. What you're seeing on his skin, that doesn't have anything to do with that blood in his poop. And every time I went with my intuitive wisdom, I was shut down so quickly and treated like I was such an idiot for thinking that.
Yeah.
And had they listened to me from the beginning, 2.5 years of my child's suffering would have been spared. And I know with certainty that if I didn't find healing for my son, he was going to get cancer. He was going to develop autoimmune diseases. He was going to live a very sick life. And it took me getting really fed up with the system to find my courage to say, no,
Yeah.
I'm going to actually start saying yes to me.
Mm-hmm. And I think we need it, it's interesting too because it doesn't take much. Like it really does not take many voices to affirm that. And I think that's the power in this community of women is that when you're in that position, had you had one or two doctors or people that you respected their opinion who you felt could comprehend the things you were saying, say, yes, I think you're onto something. If that happened in your first week, your trajectory probably would have been totally different, right? It doesn't take many voices to say, yes, I believe you. I'm here to support you. And I think you're onto something for you to just kind of keep rolling. We don't realize that they're just like deflating the air in that balloon every time you go into something and, you're shut down or you're made to, it really is like women's health. It's funny, like all the research traditionally has all been on men's health, like they're just starting to study our periods. They're like, whatever. I saw it a couple weeks ago and everyone was up in arms on the internet that they just studied tampons for the first time to see what they're doing to our health, right? And so we've got to recognize that there's just so many gaps. And even in my courses, in my workings with people, I say, I'm going to tell you this information and it's what I believe is going to be the help for you. If you don't believe it is, don't do it, right? If you don't get a yes from your body, if you don't feel that like, then don't do it. And on the same thing, I say, I'm going to talk through some topics here. And as you're going through like my trainings or whatever, if you get a little like, that could be something, I'm like, you need to trust that above everything because your body knows. Like your subconscious has a record of everything. And it's just like, when are you going to listen? When are you going to kind of bring awareness to this area? So yeah, I think that we don't recognize how little needs to change for us to tune into that and to really dive into trusting our gut, our intuition, and the circle of women that we have to support us.
Well, and I think, there's so much negative energy, I feel like, about social media, and how the algorithms change. And I'm honestly in this place right now of I am absolutely in love with it because what we are looking for, it will give us. And it's kind of the same in the universe, right? Like what we are looking for, we will receive and we will find. And I feel that social media has given us so much voice and so much power
Yeah.
to reach the women who are universally supposed to be connected with us right now and who need to see that message. I mean, my son was unwell 10 years ago. I wasn't on social media. I didn't have any connections with the world. The only research tool I had was Google, and it wasn't very helpful. I didn't have the tools. I share a lot of graphic photos of poop and skin, and topical steroid withdrawal, and these visual symptoms that you get to see help other people connect the dots and question, like, oh, feel those feelings that you were just talking about.
Yeah.
And I talk a lot about this in when you get my rebalance kits, you get free access to my course. There's 3 components to healing, and one of them is believing and trusting in yourself and in the
Mhm.
process. And when you get that feeling of like, oh, I've always wondered, like, if this food triggers my body, or if, like, those little tiny subtle voices, when
Yeah.
you start to listen to them, your body actually starts to speak to you louder, and it becomes a lot easier to be in tune with your body. But it is a process that you have to trust and you have to believe in, that it's going to happen for you. And so there's a lot of women who come into my world, and so there's two types of women. There's one who comes and, she's like, I've prayed for these answers. Thank you. I know this is going to work. And it 100% works because she arrived ready for it to work. There's
Mhm.
the other woman who comes and she's really scared. She is still really enmeshed in the system. She has been told that, cleansing her body is really dangerous, and all of these things could go wrong, and you shouldn't cleanse, and you shouldn't change this, and don't change your diet at whatever phase you're in, but especially during pregnancy or breastfeeding. Yet she's told it's probably your milk. You should stop breastfeeding and give your baby this corn syrup formula. But there's that woman who is not connected with herself yet.
Mhm.
She is not she is not there yet, and it is okay because we are all on our own timeline. And if we give ourselves the option to arrive when we're ready, we will. And that's okay, because if you are not ready, whether it's for my healing methods or the practices that you are sharing, if you aren't ready, that's okay. But give yourself time to get there and believe that you can get there, and just start listening to yourself. And so I'm wondering, I don't know if you run into this, if women are like, I'm experiencing all these things, but I'm really scared. And there's all the noise of why they can't do it. What can you speak to that woman?
Yeah, I think we have to realize how powerful our mind is, right? And so I used to do this in my physiotherapy practice. Someone would come to me and they'd say, I know this is really, really weird for me to say, but when I do blank, it makes blank feel better. And I go, it's not weird. If you told me that you painted your leg purple and it took away your headaches, I would say keep doing it, because when you believe that it's helping, you communicate on a cellular level to the rest of your body that you're healing. And the same is true for when you're not, right? We see these people that, there's research around people who have been told they have cancer and they're going to die in 6 weeks. And they die in 6 weeks and they do an autopsy and they never had the cancer, right? It's the belief system that you are communicating to your cells, and they're going, okay, let's run that operation. And so it's so interesting too, having like kind of been diving into the German new medicine, because they say, when you look at it, there's never been, and I'll just use cancer because cancer is an easy one that we all can kind of connect with, but there's never ever been a study that showed cancer in transit, ever. So they've never caught it moving from one place to another. And typically we get told we have a mass or a lump or a growth or something that gets detected, and then later it metastasizes into these holes and perforations in bony tissue and things like that. German New Medicine believes your body is playing out a biological process based on the experience that you're emotionally having. So when you get diagnosed that now you have a mass, right, your body goes, ooh, I'll self-correct. Let me pull some tissue away. Let me take some things away. Like I'll start to draw back on, whatever type of cell and what it is. And where it is in the body depends on the type of conflict or the type of emotion you're feeling. Like, is it a lack of power? Is it an infringement on your territory? There's different types of kind of categories that it goes into. And so that secondary one is a result of the news from the first one, almost in that sense. And we could be on a tangent for this, and I'll just drop one line and then move away from it. But so much of Western medicine catches the biology in its healing phase and calls it pathology because it looks abnormal. So a liver cancer, when the liver is healing, it might put a lot of fluid around the liver, because fluid brings all the types of cells to break down the damage. That's why inflammation is good for us in a sense. We don't want it chronically, but acutely, you bang your knee, it swells up. That is bringing all the cell types that will eat away that damaged and degraded tissue and flood it with new kind of collagen and things to repair. And so Western medicine catches something abnormal at that stage. There's a lot of fluid, there's a mass, there's this, there's that, and it wants to pathologize it and cut it out, right? And I'm sure, like, in your experience of gut health and things like these, they're just wrongly kind of labeled. And because it's done so frequently, we just go with it and we accept that that's the only thing. Whereas if we kind of played out this belief of, you're afraid to do something, what would you need to feel more comfortable? What would, it helps to kind of draw both lines. Is staying potentially, so for my audience and yours, kind of the common ground is potentially morning sickness based on gut health issues, right? And you either play that out, and I mean, I've even been that. I was excited when I came across your stuff because it was like, yeah, that intuitive hit of like, oh yes, because we're told it's not safe to do it. It's not safe to cleanse. Like, what's the cost of staying toxic or staying, feeding your child those things until they're stable enough to kind of correct it? So like my son right now is 2, and I've done multiple different cleanses on him throughout his first 2 years because I correct that and he absorbs more nutrients and has, better health as a result. Or I wait till it's longer and now his foundation was disrupted because he was battling so many other things at the same time. So I think it's going to ultimately come down to, what does your gut say, but what questions do you need to ask to start to feel more comfortable? What would feel like a yes, or what would take away? Like, we need to recognize, and I think maybe this is a powerful message. Zach Bush talks about this so much, that the medical system plays on fear and guilt. And when you can recognize that they're using fear or guilt, you can kind of step back and say, okay, I'm making an emotional decision, not an informed one. So, again, you got this cancer diagnosis, you're going to die, be afraid for your death, blah, blah, blah. When you don't fear that, when you go, it's okay, if it's my time, it's my time, then it's guilt is round 2. And it's, well, what will that mean for your family? Who were you going to leave them? How are they going to be able to afford the cost of your funeral? Blah, blah, blah. You should really consider this medicine. Same in pregnancy, right? I think cancer and pregnancy are probably the 2 most times that people are manipulated emotionally, because it's, you should be doing this because your baby could die, or your baby, you shouldn't do this. So I think fear and guilt are really, really leveraged around women during pregnancy. And I don't think we realize the ripple effect that has. So I would just say, recognize if you're trying to make a decision from fear or guilt, pull back and say, what do I need to make a confidence-based decision? And who do I need to talk to, or what do I need to ask to get to a place of feeling confident in my choice, rather than making a decision around fearing the worst case scenario.
I appreciate this conversation so much. And you just summed up the entire reason I have this podcast, is because you said something earlier that, you can share all the suggestions, but ultimately every woman should take it and say, does this feel right to me? And if it doesn't, then don't do it. Like, I will never tell somebody, yes, for sure, do this, go against your better judgment. No way. Like, learn everything you can, empower yourself, and make the decision that is best for you. And I'm here for you to lean on, to support you in that. You are here for your community. And that's the best gift we can give people. You know, I have a friend who she's a really, really incredible energy worker, and she has focused all of her work now on cancer patients, terminally ill cancer patients. And the thing that she is gifting them is their entire surrounding, their family, their, any medical support that they have is you're going to die. And they go into her office and she's like, "You're not going to die. Like, you don't have to die." And she just sees this like bright golden light around them of like,
Yeah.
we can make it through. Like, you're going to heal. And it's the first bit of hope that they are given since they have been given their diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
And she is healing these women. Their cancer has completely, it's not progressing or it's completely untraceable now. And that speaks to the power of our mind. And so I love your response that you really have to sit with yourself and you have to determine, where is this coming from? Is this coming from fear? Is this coming from guilt? Or is this coming from an educated, empowered place? And if it is coming from that place, you will just have a clear hell yes or hell no, and there won't be emotion attached to it.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the most powerful place you can make decisions for every part of your life, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's like
So
exactly like I home birth being a first time mom having a previous, miscarriage and an HG pregnancy because I just got to that place of being like, nope, I know exactly what is possible for me and what is not because I'm the decision maker in that.
absolutely. Well, and that is amazing because I am sure that think of the different direction that your pregnancy could have gone
Yeah.
had you not taken this power in the beginning and made you created your experience. We all create our experience. And I listen to a podcast every day. It's called the Positive Mindset Podcast with a man named Henry. And he is always saying, we are the creator of our experiences. And this is exactly what that means is
Mhm.
the choices that we make, the yes and the no's that we say, we are creating our experience. And so our system says, yeah, it's really unsafe to cleanse your body during pregnancy or while breastfeeding. Well, what you said earlier is exact I want to talk about for a little bit is, but what about that imbalance?
Mhm.
How dangerous is it to live with that imbalance? How much risk is there for you to go throughout your entire pregnancy with a significant imbalance that you then pass on to your baby when they pass through your birth canal? What then?
Yeah.
What are the risks associated with that? Nobody's going to talk about that because your baby will get eczema and then you just slap on a steroid cream. And maybe you will have your baby will be born prematurely. There are so many risks attached to a
Mhm.
significant gut imbalance, to parasites, to yeast overgrowths, to H. pylori that
Yeah.
nobody is talking about.
Yeah.
Everybody just talks about, oh, don't do anything different during pregnancy. If you're breastfeeding, you got to wait until you're done to cleanse. Well, you are sharing your microbiome with your baby through your milk.
Yeah.
And so even if it's not just for the woman's health, for that child's health, and I it's such a tedious line here because I don't want to fall into the guilt. This is not guilt. Like the
Yeah.
medical system, I'm not trying to have this conversation to instill fear or guilt. It's just to raise awareness that this is a whole side of imbalance that nobody talks about.
Yeah, I think it's bringing awareness to there's a cost of every decision and there's a cost of the inaction or the indecision around that, right? And it's not a matter of be fearful and choose my bias over their bias. It's when you come to that, are you considering both options? Are you looking at both evenly? And I think this is something the medical system doesn't do well is they tell you, in my pregnancy, they were like, well, we want to test your blood to see if you have enough antibodies to rubella, because if not, we want to update that with a booster. And I said, okay, what's the percentage? She's like, I don't really know, but it's not, basically the conversation was if you get rubella, you or your baby could die. And then, when I said, okay, I looked up the research. I called my health department. It was the last case was in our region was 40 years ago. They've never had a reported case since. And the update for the, in Canada they had, I think in 2017 they had one. But in terms of our health department, they haven't had a case in 40 years. And they said, I said, well, how, like, what happens? And it was just through all the COVID stuff. So they were like, well, you kind of get like that. You get a call saying you had a contact and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I've never gotten a call in my life about being in contact with somebody who has had rubella. And I don't know anybody else, but that's how they track it. And so here they are saying if you don't take it, your chance of your baby dying are triple or whatever. I don't know what the actual number right now off by hand because I'm kind of removed from that at this point. Then I looked in the number and it's like 0.001 to 0.003, like that's kind of the thing. And so it's easy to make a fear decision when you go, oh my God, there's a double the chances my baby doesn't pull through if I get this. Then you go into the number and you go, okay, a fraction of a percent to a fraction of a percent. Now I feel a lot more confident in the decision I'm making one way or the other. So I think that is the case. And to touch on what you kind of led into this with, this is where I want to raise awareness. I don't want to shame women who go down the route of needing pharmaceutical intervention with their pregnancy, because certainly I had 3 weeks of taking the medication because it was that or my amniotic fluid. Like I couldn't get enough in. If I took one sip of water, I threw up 10 times that. And so the balance just wasn't there. But when you take that medication and you mute that communication from your body and you ride it out, you didn't do a lot to address the underlying causes. So one of the things, like I say, when we're first pregnant in our first trimester, we're getting sick all the time, we're not really keeping in nutrients. They go, it's okay, just take any prenatal from the Shoppers Drug Mart or Walgreens or wherever, CVS, and you're totally fine. Like that will help fill those voids. Not taking into consideration, genetic factors around MTHFR gene and whether you can break down those B vitamins or convert them or not. And so when one of the reasons women can be sick in their pregnancy is nutrient deficiencies, which obviously have another root cause, but nutrient deficiencies, if you just take a medication and eat Chick-fil-A the rest of your pregnancy because you're eating for 2, what did you do to address those nutrient deficiencies? Nothing. And then baby comes out, there was low folate during the time of its like brain and spinal cord development, so it has a tongue tie, it has potentially a cleft palate, there's all these different things that we can draw the line actually quite easily if you are somebody who understands the body and what the body needs. But when you're siloed into these little compartments of medicine and they go, it's fine, just do this. And then nobody's connecting those dots along the way. It's so easy for things to get missed. And so for me, in my experience, I had a ton of health knowledge. I have, like I said, I have 4 degrees studying the human body. And it pales in comparison to what I've learned since getting pregnant and going through that, knowing that I probably had, obviously we all do really some level of parasite activity that I passed on, yeast and fungal, at 2 years, I'm still like just dealing with the last of cradle cap and things like that. And there's these signs that now I know, so I know how to kind of work around them. And if I have a future pregnancy, I'm excited about all the things I can change. But we got to also not feel guilty about, the journey that we've taken to get there. And I'm going to tie this around to one last thing. You said you actually really love that social media can come, into play here. And I think this is the gift. Like this is a gift that you and I both have and that women have, is we both went through our journeys and it was this long of suffering and we can condense this big. And then now the choice is, do you want the expedited version to the solution, to the answer to what might help? Or do you want to go through the long journey yourself? Some people have to, right? Some people just aren't open to the, yes, let me take in your information and just condense, condense time. So yeah, I think there was a lot that I kind of sandwiched in there, but this social media is great. there are so many costs to not taking action the same way there are to taking a different action. And we need to just come to a place where we look at both sides of those and weigh them up to make our own informed decision.
I just kind of want to break down some different, candida, H. pylori, maybe even things like antibiotic use preconception or early pregnancy, how all of these can factor into morning sickness of any severity and go throughout a woman's pregnancy and then postpartum.
So I think, if we generally want to like lump this, like one of the things I kind of look at is internal toxins. So in my categories that I've broken down, external toxins is one, all the things around your house and in your environment that are adding to your toxic load. But there's also internal toxins that you're not clearing out. So we've never been taught how our body clears toxins, imbalances, anything like that. And we have no, as a general society, we don't have an education around how to support and optimize that. So what can happen is certain viruses, fungus, yeast, pathogens like an H. pylori, a parasite, any of these different sort of things that are on the table can find a way to live inside our body and have a hospitable environment. So, when we have parasites, it's not just that we can do a one and done cleanse and then everything's great. We need to ask, like, what is the terrain in my body that's making it optimal for these imbalances to keep going on? And that's what needs to be addressed. And so there is two kind of factors. It's obviously like reducing the bad and improving the good. So I think antibiotics, what they do is they just take everything down a lot. And so I like to explain these things with the analogy of like a bank robbery. So say you have a bank robbery underway and there's one security guard and 10 robbers. Like it's clear what's going to happen there versus and just doing something that kills 5 things in general, right? Like that does nothing to skew the ratio there of like this robbery is still going to happen because the bad was in such a big population. So we need to sort of think about like, what do I actually do to put more security guards in my bank? And then that's how I'm going to stop any robberies, because there's always going to be robbers coming, just wiping them out once doesn't mean that that's going to stop. So we need to start building up the security guards in our body and recreating those balances, because that's really what plays out, in an electrolyte balance. It's really clear. You go to the hospital like, oh, your potassium's really out of whack, or this is the case. They give you a little bit, they send you on your way, you feel better. In my case, they gave me like an IV, I had some potassium in it, feel much better. If I don't work to correct that, I'm passing those things on. And so I think really like all of these internal toxins, your body doesn't have the resources to, at the time, potentially get rid of them. And so they build up in your tissues. And now if I'm building, my son's heart out of the, it's kind of blueprinting off of my heart, and I've got some type of infection in there or imbalance, right? Maybe the heart's not the best thing. A stomach would probably be a better example. If my body is saying, okay, here's the blueprint, now reconstruct that organ for this tiny little human, what is it going off of? What imbalance is it mimicking or pulling, or like those cells? And this is another reason why like stress and things come into play, is like, how can you work when you're under that much pressure in your body, right? And that stress can be emotional or perceived, or it could be toxic. It could be you have really high levels of xenoestrogens or different things in your system that are creating this internal stress. So when you have the option to cleanse or rebalance or recalibrate that a bit, even if it doesn't address every root cause, my belief is that any medicine and supplement should be the bridge to give you enough time to kind of do that deeper work at the same time, right? So in the case of your cleanse, to help cleanse the microbiome and the gut health, that's great. And then you need to say, what have I been doing to support the environment where these things can live? And maybe that's something that was nutrients, maybe that's medication use, maybe that's living in a home with mold, and then yeast and fungus can just continually reside in your system because there's all the resources there. So it's about leveraging these things to get our health improved, and then saying like, great, that worked. How do I support and sustain that?
I love that so much because I think that there, especially in the holistic space, there's so much focus on the healing stage, but then there's not a whole lot in like maintaining
Mm-hmm.
that found healing. Healing is multifaceted. It includes our brain and our thoughts and our how we're managing stress and how we're carrying stress. And this is something that I hear so often is, people are like, I've done everything. I've been battling this for 17 years, 5 years, all these crazy amounts of times. Nothing has worked. I did your rebalance kit and it's worked. And the reason why is because the rebalance kit addresses all of the imbalances. It's not just targeting candida yeast or just parasites. It's targeting any bad bacteria overgrowth, pathogens, mold, fungus, all of it together while rebuilding the good microbiome. So this gives your body a really solid foundation. But
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, the reason I give people access to my course is because supplements are only a component to healing.
Mm-hmm.
And anywhere you go that they say, here, just take this magic supplement and your life will change, they are lying to you because the supplements are part of the healing. They can be a wonderful tool, but alone, there is not a single supplement that can heal you forever because there is work that has to be done in your body. And so,
Mm-hmm.
this is why I give people access to my course because I really want them to heal, but the healing comes from within. It's
Yeah.
making lifestyle changes. If you continue to feed the bad bacteria, the yeast, the pathogens, the parasites, there's an internal new battle going on where the supplements are trying to kill those overgrowths, but you're continuing to feed them. And so there's this battle. I love your bank robbery analogy because it's so true. And so if you simultaneously supplement to kill those overgrowths and rebuild the good microbiome while starving
Yeah.
them by not feeding them the foods that they thrive on, while then, really moving deeply into your mind and your thoughts and focusing on your habits and changing your life as a whole, that's where the healing comes from. That's where the long-term healing comes from.
Yeah.
And everybody uncovers different things inside their body in their healing process. And it's so beautiful. But I never want to be here to, for somebody to be under the illusion that I am selling a quick fix because healing is not quick.
Yeah.
It is a commitment. And I hear it so often. I've been rebalancing for 3 days. I've not seen anything yet. And as a culture, we are so conditioned for, you know,
You've been battling with this for 15 years. It's going to take more than three
exactly.
days.
Exactly. Your body is healing a lifetime of imbalance. Of course, it's going to take time. And another question I get all the time is, how long is this going to take? I don't know.
Yeah.
Everybody's imbalance is so unique to them based on genetics and their external toxic exposure, the internal toxicity of their body. Everybody's body is so different, and everybody's healing timeline is unique to them, but it all comes back to us creating our experience and choosing to trust the process of healing and knowing that when we find the thing that is such a sacral hell yes and just holding on to that and knowing that it's going to work, it will work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think like one of the areas that I address in my work, not me personally, because it's not my expertise, but I brought someone in, is that energy component. So you're talking about like these sacral hell yeses, like when we are getting those hits in the chakras and in the areas of our body that are connected to our feminine energy, we need to start adopting those. I did a poll a couple weeks ago on my Instagram story and I said, how many women who've experienced more than mild morning sickness or HG would have described themselves as a type A, get stuff done, in their masculine energy, kind of do it all woman? Or how many would describe themselves as really being in their feminine energy, being really open to receiving, feeling like soft and flowing with, their day-to-day experience? And I think it was like 93-7 or 97-3%, right? And like that is one of the components. Like, who knew that your personality type was going to be the reason why you could have had morning sickness, but it's because you're disconnected with those feminine components and your body is like, nope, like there's an imbalance there and I'm going to force you to go into the slowness. Right. And I think for HG, like that, for me, that was one of the reasons that I probably had HG, because had I not, I would have just like carried on as if, I wasn't pregnant and growing a human.
Yeah. Well, that's a whole other component is us being able to, and I think it's a whole lot easier once we have made it to the other side, is to take the time to actually thank our bodies
Yeah.
because the experiences that we have gone through, it's our body communicating with us and taking us on the path that we are supposed to be on. And look at the impact that you are making now for so many other women because you were gifted your experience. And
Mhm.
when we are in the thick of it, it can be really, really hard to have that kind of umbrella overview of it's more of a why is this happening to me rather than what is this gifting me?
Yeah.
And being able to take that shift though in your mind is absolute power when you are in the thick of it.
Hmm. Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that every experience that we have a choice. We can be a victim to that experience, or we can be like the main character of that experience. And like, what would you do if you're the main character, right? If you're not just sitting back waiting for the scenario around you to change, like you're in it, like what are you going to do? And so for me it was kind of like I need to come to decisions that feel aligned for me, in my health, in my pregnancy, afterwards. And then from there, where do I choose to go with that? It's easy, and this is something hard that I like have to kind of break through, because there are women in my HG communities that are suffering so badly, right? Like their life potentially is at risk with how severe things are and the fact that we don't address the root cause. But do they just stay there and say like, okay, I guess this is it. I guess I'll never have another child again. I guess I'll never do this again. I'll be lucky to survive. Or you need to go like, no, like, why did this happen to me? What do I need to change? I too have like two types of women. I have the women who are like currently sick and currently battling and need that support right now. And then I have the women that are like, I long for another member to my family. I wanted to have more kids, but I can't because of this. And I'm like, no, you can if you want to. The choice is yours, sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
And if you do, then great. Tony Robbins has a thing saying, I'm not your guru. Like, we are not your healer. We are like the handhold to tell you what, like, that's that path or that's that path. What feels good for you, sort of thing. So, yeah,
Exactly.
I think it just wraps it around to like the power being within us, we being guides to give you the information that you need to make the decisions along that journey, but ultimately the journey is whatever you choose it to be.
Most definitely. Jess, this has been such a pleasure talking to you. Our work is so similar. We are filling gaps in
Mm-hmm.
areas that nobody really seems to talk about. Nobody is addressing. Nobody knows that you can heal from morning sickness, that is an option, that you can take that power within you and you can heal your body, and that morning sickness is a symptom. It is
Mm-hmm.
not just a thing that we are
No,
told that just happens to some people. Just like chronic UTIs, chronic mastitis, ear infections, these are not things that just happen. Cradle
no.
cap,
It's telling
eczema.
us, it's talking to us, and we just need somebody to help decipher that language, right? And sometimes that's all it takes. And once you have someone to give you those few key words of deciphering it, it's like, okay, I can do this now. I can kind of communicate with my body. And it's so like one of the easiest things, like the traditional Chinese medicine clock. I've had people that are like, oh my God, I wake up every night at like midnight. And I'm like, okay, well, that's your gallbladder. Do you also have a stuffy sinus or postnasal drip? Do you also have this? And I'm like, oh my God, yes, yes, yes. And as soon as I draw that correlation, they're like, huh, so all these things are like related. And it just opens up the curiosity. And I think that we just need to have that, like the curiosity to say, what is this telling me? This feels weird. What is this telling me? And who do I need to access to get, to get that deciphered?
Most definitely. Okay, Jess, I am going to attach all of your information in the show notes so that anybody can reach out to you easily. And I can't wait to stay connected with you on Instagram and for you to experience the rebalance.
Yeah.
And it's just such a gift to know you. And I can't wait to keep following along.
Yeah, thanks so much. I know I'm really excited. I really think it's going to be something that is such a powerful asset to my community. So thank you for your work as well.
Thank you for joining me in today's episode of Follow Your Gut. If we don't know each other, I'm Juniper Bennett. I'm a homeschooling mama to my 4 children, a dedicated microbiome specialist, certified family health coach, author of the Microbiome Cookbook, and founder of Only Organics, a supplement and education brand focused on women and children's gut health. I will have all of the resources mentioned in today's episode linked in the show notes for you below. You can also find me on Instagram at only, ONLE, organics. Send me a DM. I love connecting with listeners, and make sure to subscribe to my newsletter so you never miss an episode. In fact, while you're over on Instagram saying hello, send me another message with the word newsletter and I'll add you to the list. Or you can find a link to join the list below. Lastly, it's important for you to know that the information shared on this podcast is based on my personal experiences and research. Please always trust your own inner voice of wisdom and your healthcare professional. Until next time.